Good morning, everyone. We're here today, as everyone knows, to deal with the main estimates from natural resources. Pursuant to Standing Order 81-4, deal with the main estimates 2014-15, Vote 1 under Atomic Energy of Canada Limited, Vote 1 under Canadian Nuclear Safety Commission, Vote 1 under National Energy Board, Votes 1, 5, and 10 under Natural Resources, Vote 1 under Northern Pipeline Agency, referred to the committee on Thursday, February 27, 2014. Just before we get to today's meeting with the Minister, I just want to ask members if it would be acceptable. There have been some discussions before this meeting. If we take a few minutes after the meeting, just a very few minutes, to discuss how we proceed next week. Is that agreed? Yeah, votes depending on all of that. Okay, very good. Thank you very much. We will do that then. And I want to start then today by welcoming the Minister to our committee, the very first appearance for Minister Rickford, and with him, of course, his Deputy Minister. Minister, thank you again very much for making yourself available this early in your mandate. I know it takes a lot of preparation when it is a new area, but I also know you're very well versed in the area. So looking forward to this committee meeting. And we'll start with your opening comments and then the usual go-to questions and comments from members. So again, thank you so much for being here, and go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for this opportunity to all my colleagues here. I have to say I was looking forward to having a discussion. You've been doing some important work, but I was really looking forward back to have some of this famous committee coffee. There's nothing like it in the city, so that's the first thing I did. Mr. Chair, as I said, it's a pleasure to meet with the committee for my first time as the Member of Parliament for the Great Kenora riding, which covers more than 290,000 square kilometres of land, of water, of trees, of minerals. I have a sound understanding of the importance of natural resources. They are, in no uncertain terms, the lifeblood of my riding in northwestern Ontario. So obviously I'm pleased to be here today in my capacity and explain the important work of our government in the natural resources portfolio. Durant les 10 semaines pendant lesquelles j'ai été...
In my 10 weeks as Minister of Natural Resources, I've had the privilege of witnessing the opportunity that our vast natural resources present to all Canadians. Mr. Chair, there is no questioning the role natural resources play in maintaining the strength of our economy.
Impacts of the forest, energy and metals and minerals industries account for close to 20% of Canada's nominal GDP and some 1.8 million jobs for Canadians. Over the past 5 years, the resource sector has added $32 billion a year to government revenues. Revenues, of course, that go to support important programming, including health care and education. Talk about opportunities for growth. Alors que nous portons un regard vers l'avenir, la diversité.
As we look to the future, market diversification will play a crucial role in unleashing our natural resource potential, particularly for energy resources like oil and gas.
Customer for its energy, the United States. In 2012 alone, Canadian producers lost over $13 billion in revenue, more than $35 million a day, because of our narrow customer base. Mr. Chair, that is significant. That's why the private sector is pursuing potential new pipeline proposals east, west, and south to expand access into new markets as well as the U.S., and open new markets in Asia, Europe, and elsewhere. I know that this committee has grappled with that to a certain extent. L'ensemble de ces projets souligne la nécessité.
All of these projects underscore a need and an opportunity to diversify our energy markets. This is a time-limited proposition, and the pressure on Canada to respond quickly is high.
En tant que gouvernement, nous sommes très soucieux de l'importance des...
As a government, we are very mindful of the importance of the resource sectors to our economy, and equally mindful of the importance of developing our natural resources in a responsible manner.
Plan for responsible resource development. With this plan in place, Canada now has one of the most competitive and one of the most effective regulatory regimes in the world. Le recoupement chronophage est au-dessus des examens de projets du gouvernement fédéral.
This is the overarching principle behind our government's plan for responsible resource development. With this plan, Canada now has one of the most competitive and effective regulatory regimes in the world.
Proceed unless and until it has been proven safe for our workers, for our communities, and for the environment. Responsible resource development is an ongoing top priority of our government and certainly of natural resources. I'd like to talk a little bit about tanker and pipeline safety. Nous nous engageons à prendre des mesures visant.
We are committed to taking steps to improve our already robust tanker and pipeline safety system that will result in strong prevention, enhanced preparedness and response, and improved liability and compensation in the very unlikely event of an incident.
Measures to enhance these energy transportation systems. The New World Tanker Safety Measures respond to the Tanker Safety Expert Panel report and continue our work towards preventing spills in the first place, cleaning them up quickly should they occur, and making sure that polluters pay. As this is the part of the enhanced system, we are modernizing Canada's marine navigation system, establishing new area response planning partnerships, and supporting, importantly, Aboriginal communities' participation in marine and pipeline preparedness and response planning. Outre les mesures déjà adoptées depuis quelques années.
In addition to the steps already taken in recent years for our pipeline safety system, we are expanding the power of the National Energy Board to enforce compliance. We'll also ask the National Energy Board to provide guidance on the use of the best available technologies in federally regulated pipeline projects. New measures will ensure that companies are fully liable and provide compensation for damage to the environment and property in the event of a spill. The polluter pays principle will now be enshrined in law so that it's clear that Canadian taxpayers are not expected to foot the bill in the event of a major oil spill.
Regional communities in planning and operations to ensure their local expertise is incorporated into our world-class safety systems as well. Our government intends to develop a strategy in full consultation and collaboration with Aboriginal communities to better integrate Aboriginal people and their communities into energy infrastructure development. This was a key recommendation of the recent report by Special Representative Douglas Aford, and I was pleased to be in Prince Rupert earlier this week to announce two important measures for enhanced Aboriginal engagement. Includes the creation of a major projects management office in the West and a tripartite agreement in the province of British Columbia and First Nations leaders. En effet, notre gouvernement comprend l'avantage de la pleine.
Indeed, our government understands the benefit of the full participation of Aboriginal Canadians in all respects of resource development.
Mr. Chair, with this context, let me discuss my department's main estimates for 2014-15. The estimates show planned budgetary spending of $2.53 billion, which is a decrease of about $232 million from the previous fiscal year. La diminution d'une année à l'autre.
The decrease from year to year is the net result of a number of changes in levels of spending across different items, against the backdrop of diligent management of resources as our government works towards realising a balanced budget by 2015.
Main estimates do not include all the decisions of our government has taken in support of Canada's natural resource industries. For example, Canada's Economic Action Plan 2014 will deliver on priorities such as $90.4 million over 4 years for investments in the forest sector, specifically IFIT, initiative to foster job creation and, importantly, innovation in communities' forestry operations across Canada. IFIT provides support for the adoption of advanced technologies and the commercialization of new products in the forest sector. L'injection d'une somme de 11,4 millions de dollars sur 5 ans
$11.4 million over 5 years to invest in state-of-the-art earthquake monitoring systems. Supporting the safety of families and communities, the Government of Canada is providing emergency planners and responders real-time information about earthquakes in Canada.
To maintain safe and reliable operations at Chalk River laboratories while we take steps to restructure the labs and prepare for transition to a government-owned, contractor-operated model. And $28 million over 2 years to assist the National Energy Board as it undertakes an unprecedented number of reviews of major projects. I should note, colleagues, approximately 90% of the funding received by the NEB is cost recovered from the energy industry. In conclusion, Mr. Chair, NRCan's 2014-15 main estimates clearly demonstrate how this government is committed to delivering on policy, program and service delivery priorities for Canadians and doing so in a fiscally responsible manner. Nous collaborons avec l'industrie, les chefs et les collectivités autochtones.
We are working with industry, Aboriginal leaders and communities, provinces and other key stakeholders to ensure Canada's natural resources continue to be the cornerstone of our prosperity and the heart of an innovative, competitive Canadian economy.
Here before the committee, I look forward to taking your questions. Je vous remercie de nouveau pour la possibilité de me présenter.
Thank you again for the opportunity to appear before the committee, and I look forward to taking your questions.
Thank you very much, Minister, once again for your opening comments. We go now to questions and comments. We start with the 7-minute round, which allows 1 round to each of the 3 recognized political parties in the House, and after that we carry on with a 5-minute round as allowed. I want to remind members the Minister is here only for an hour, and his schedule requires that he leave on time at about 9:45. So we'll start. First 7-minute round to Mr. Leaf. Go ahead, please, Mr. Leaf.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and Minister, welcome to the committee. As you can see, I don't share your same affinity for the committee coffee, so I brought my own. Minister, you've been to my riding in the Yukon Territory in former capacity, and obviously hasn't missed you that mining is an important part of the Yukon sector. In fact, just last week I was back in the Yukon for the annual gold show, and hundreds of people gathered in Dawson City to talk about the investment climate and the mining prospects coming up for the next year. We see in our territory how many jobs are provided for First Nation and non-First Nation people in the mining sector, and of course the direct, indirect, and induced benefits from the mining sector. I'm just wondering if you can elaborate on what the main estimates are going to provide for mining sector support across the country.
Well, thank you for your question through you, Mr. Chair. We recognize the importance, obviously, of the mining industry. We share a passion for its profile in our respective regions, and in my short tenure as minister, we've been very proactive, especially during mining week, sitting down and having some mining roundtables. What we've heard, I can say, are in the main estimates. Obviously, the 15% mineral exploration tax credit for an additional year has been appreciated. Obviously, I can respect and understand the desire for that to be ongoing and reflect the activities, particularly that exploration sets up for extractive activities. This credit has helped junior mineral exploration companies raise capital by providing an incentive for investors to finance mineral exploration. I can say that the tax credit has helped junior mining companies in these specific regards raise more than $5 billion for exploration activities. We are also taking action to streamline review processes for major projects, which is helping to attract investments. It's providing greater certainty and clarity in the regulatory process. And I might add, Mr. Chair, or through you to my colleague, that These processes have begun to involve substantially more and more First Nation community members in some of those activities. And so I'm very pleased to see that. That's obviously occurring within the context of the Ring of Fire in my region. And finally, we've announced in Phase 2, investment in Phase 2 of the Geomapping for Energy and Minerals program. This is a key objective. It supports increased exploration for new mineral resources, particularly in the north. And of course, when we say the north, we probably have two categories, my north and of course north of 60. So it's been beneficial in those regards.
Thank you, Minister. And yeah, there is definitely that north. You know what north is, and
of the north.
That's right. And then there's the Arctic. I'm just wondering if you can explain to the committee what NRCan is doing in terms of establishing mandatory reporting standards for the Canadian extractive companies.
Yeah, this, as I said in my early stage of my tenure as Minister of Natural Resources, this has been a file that we have been very busy meeting with my provincial counterparts, First Nations leaders, and obviously the private sector. Look, Canada is recognized as a world leader in promoting transparency and accountability in the extractive sector. That would include obviously mining and energy, right here at home and around the world. In 2013, we announced plans to develop a mandatory reporting standards. This exercise was to work in concert with the United States and Europe on some alignment around mandatory reporting standards. We're in the process of seeking relevant feedback from the provinces, territories, and Aboriginal groups, as well as the private sector. It will mean a level playing field for companies operating domestically and abroad, enhanced investment certainty in reinforcing the integrity of Canadian extractive companies, and it will mean, I guess, most importantly, that citizens in resource-rich countries around the world will be better informed overall and understand the benefits from responsible resource development in their own countries, and to the extent that countries like ours are operating there, have a full appreciation for what those activities, what are involved in those activities.
Great, thank you. How much time, Mr. Chair? 2 minutes. Minister, you touched on it when in your opening address, the topic of responsible resource development, and of course in the north, we have in the north, both in your Great Kenora riding and in the Yukon, we have people that have a great affinity for the work and the prosperity that mining brings, but also for the natural environment around them. And I think in the past there's been this tendency to discuss mining and resource extraction, natural resource extraction in an either-or discussion. It's either you have care and concern for the environment, or you're involved in extractive sector work. And I think our government's done a tremendous amount of work in making sure that it isn't an either-or discussion, that it's not mutually exclusive, that we can very much have care and concern for the national environment, and at the same time utilize the tremendous resources that we have in our country. And it's been well said that riches under the ground don't necessarily equate to wealth above ground, and we have to be able to access those, but as you've indicated, in a responsible manner. I'm just wondering if you can talk a bit about what the main estimates do to ensure that we maintain a solid path toward responsible resource development, and really what that means to you and your department.
Yeah, well,
Minister, you have about a half minute for your response.
Half a minute? Okay. Yeah, no, I think in short, Mr. Chair, the way I see this, and certainly in my current capacity, is that it's not an either-or proposition. I think the main estimates and the policy platform from which they derive, and the observations that I've had, both in the private sector and now in a political capacity, have created opportunities for communities, and in particular First Nations communities, to be involved in all aspects of resource development. This has played a critical role, obviously, for things like Ring of Fire, where we see small First Nations communities, very isolated, participating in the environmental assessment process. Their participation for things like traditional land use planning and the likes are customary practices. They're essential parts of the environmental assessment process designed to be protected and respected when and if extraction activities actually occur. So that's the way I see the policy sort of evolving and actually working. God help us all.
Thank you very much. We go now to the official opposition, to Ms. Duncan, up to 7 minutes. Go ahead, please.
Thank you very much, and nice to have you here, Mr. Minister. Congratulations on your new portfolio. We used to sit across this way, and appreciate you giving us an hour. Lots to cover. We look forward to having you back many more times. I hope you'll be open to our invitations. The first question I'd like to ask you right off the bat comes out of the remarks you've just given. And I'm curious about, under your administration of this department, what is happening with the Canadian energy strategy? You have stated that you're pursuing what you call responsible energy development, and you have also stated that it is going to proceed only when it's proven safe to workers, communities, and for the environment. I don't know if you're aware, but you might want to get your staff to pass on to you a report done by the Canada West Foundation, a well-known foundation, economic foundation in Alberta. And they've raised serious concerns about the direction the federal government is taking. They're saying that there's too much time spent in advertising and branding and not enough on actually engaging the people who are potentially impacted. They come right out and state Canada is not a superpower and that Canada should therefore be acting in a different kind of direction, making sure that people buy in Canada, whether they're Aboriginal Canadians, whether they're small communities. So I wonder if you could tell us, we haven't heard since the fiasco with the Bruce Carson initiative with the Canadian Energy Strategy, which was then a closed door between industry and government. Are you intending to pursue a Canadian energy strategy, and if so, in what direction? Or are you going to simply be continuing to spend the hundreds of millions on advertising?
Minister, go ahead, please.
There may be several questions packed in there. Obviously, I think the best way to start, Mr. Chair, is to give a specific example of how perhaps this is being done differently. It fits with an energy strategy, at least in terms of approach. Pipeline safety, as you may or may not know, has been one of the topics over the past couple of weeks in my 10-week tenure now as the Minister of Natural Resources, where we hope we're sending a clear signal of the importance of a strategy that looks at prevention, preparedness and readiness, and obviously a liability and compensation regime that's in place. This has been consistent with our approach to nuclear energy. It's been consistent with our approach in other government departments where energy, the energy approach to energy overall is substantially and substantively implicated, and I'm talking about marine safety. My exercises in the past few weeks in particular have been focused on community engagement, policies and tools for example, the National Energy Board to focus on enforcement and for communities to be involved in the safety aspects of, for example, pipeline safety. This has been very well received by stakeholders, by community leaders, and I think it's a really good example of where our government moving forward understands in the context of energy development, energy infrastructure, energy transportation, that when it's well understood in the context of community-level participation in the EAP, the JRP, or the National Energy Board, and then subsequent to that on community-level activities that focus on safety, specifically prevention, preparedness, and readiness. I'm speaking primarily of land-based because that's what fits within natural resources, and of course a liability regime. Those kinds of exercises and investments, if you will, go a long way to create more confidence and more education and understanding about a national energy strategy.
Thank you. To quote you back, Mr. Minister, you said we've been clear projects will not proceed unless and until it's been proven safe for workers, safe for communities, and safe for the environment. Your counterpart in environment, I believe, was one that initiated the study on fracking. And that report has been very clear that there's not been enough work on monitoring and assessing whether or not fracking is safe. So there we have one sector is continuing to proceed where it is not proven that it is safe. We have other sectors, for example, in the oil sands, where recent studies, including by the federal government, have shown that there may be significant impacts on the environment, and yet the government is continuing to allow those projects to proceed. I'm wondering what measures you are anticipating taking to actually start delivering on that. The most important is the report on the Gateway, which of course has countless recommendations for work that needs to be done before they can determine how they can proceed safely. So can we anticipate then that there will be no approval for the Gateway project until it is absolutely proven safe for tanker traffic, for recovery of oil spills and so forth? I have personal experience with the failed federal provincial response to major spills. Bunker C, 200,000 cubic liters still lie in my lake after a derailment. So I'm hoping you can give assurance that we're not going to be giving any more and more approvals until they in fact are proven safe, these dangerous projects.
Minister, you have about a minute and a half. I would like to just remind members this meeting is about the main estimates. I also acknowledge that any question to the minister and his portfolio is allowed at these meetings, so go ahead please, Minister.
Well, thank you for that. And there's a certain polyvalence to that question. I'll try to address a number of them. First of all, obviously I can't speak to Northern Gateway right now because it is under review and we're carefully examining the report and its 209 conditions. I can tell you, or tell the chair, through the chair to the member, that I can't share your view fully and completely. I think this government quite recently has demonstrated an ability to draw bright lines around specific projects. Obviously, Prosperity Mine is a really good example of that, and I was in the House of Commons when some of your colleagues with glee crossed the floor and spoke openly about the government's ability to make tough decisions around resource development, major legacy files that had significant economic benefits.
That was the first.
Finally, with respect to shale gas development, look, we support responsible resource development includes shale gas. The provinces and territories obviously have their own natural resources and primary responsibility for this. We're seeing in British Columbia robust activity, sensitivities to all of the environmental components, the need to have First Nations communities fully integrated and involved in any and all activities that it's implicated. The health and safety and protection of Canadians and our communities are paramount in this, of course, but we have seen no indication, obviously, of contamination to drinking water from things like shale gas activities, and I think as long as they are subject to rigorous independent review, I'm comfortable that provinces will make responsible decisions around the development of shale gas, and that to the extent the federal government is implicated, for example, in certain exercises around for pipeline safety, that we'll be there to support these activities.
Thank you very much, Ms. Duncan, Minister. We go now to the final questioner in the 7-minute round, Mr. Regan, the critic for the Liberal Party of Canada. Go ahead, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Minister, for coming today. Nice to have you here in your new capacity, and I look forward to you coming back often to enjoy more of the committee coffee. You were in British Columbia this week to announce 2 projects to garner First Nation support for oil and gas development. Do you have a timeline for implementing the remainder of the AFERD report's recommendations, particularly those around building trust and advancing reconciliation, and what are the costs associated with implementing those recommendations?
Yeah, thank you for that important and timely question. Through you, Mr. Chair, let me say that we receive and accept the findings of the report overall. The announcements and the exercises that I went through just this week in announcing the 2 key pieces are meant to respect what we're actually trying to embark on with respect to the other recommendations, and that is to set up a major project management office west that will address substantially and substantively with the issues and the opportunities that can arise out of responsible resource development, but more specifically in the context of energy energy development overall, specific points around energy transportation and energy infrastructure, safety measures, etc. The second piece is left open as well in a very purposeful way. The announcement is being called a tripartite forum. The proposal has been to have a principals table, Mr. Chair, which would contemplate senior ministers or ministers seized of the specific mandate items around energy and environment and or Aboriginal affairs, the federal level, at the provincial level, and I can say we have buy-in from our Albertan and British Columbia partners, and then importantly, First Nations senior leadership that would be able to sit at that table with a mandate to make decisions on specific issues and opportunities around a given project or a project.
Okay, speaking of First Nations leaders, according to media reports, several First Nation leaders told you in no uncertain terms this week that they don't support the Northern Gateway pipeline. They simply don't believe that the environment or their communities will be protected. So, Mr. Minister, if you're serious about building trust and confidence, will you listen to the First Nation concerns about the Northern Gateway and make a firm commitment today that you will not, I repeat, not approve that project unless it has the support of Aboriginal communities and their leaders?
So the responsibility and the discussions that we've had with First Nations, especially over the past couple of weeks, have been focused on what we're all interested in. In the context of British Columbia, obviously this has been about the LNG. Our responsibilities, Mr. Chair, extend to more than 73,000 kilometres of pipeline across Canada, and there are a number of proposals for pipelines at various stages. They may be in the corporate office of a given pipeline company, they may be in a proposal to an environmental assessment board or the National Energy Board, or they may be further advanced and currently under consultation through those fora. But importantly, my discussions with those First Nations leaders was focused on the superordinate goals of ensuring that they would be full participants in the energy full scope of energy development, which includes the safety measures, I alluded to them earlier, and as well the economic opportunities.
So that we would, like a no.
we would rise above any specific file because that would be our responsibility as senior leaders for the purposes of what I announced yesterday, which I think goes to your original narrative.
So I guess you're not prepared to make a commitment today of that sort. Let me turn to another subject. Ontario's come to the table with a $1 billion commitment to provide all-season access to the Ring of Fire area, but they, of course, need matching funds from the federal government. And, Minister, your response was to tell them to fill out an application form for the Building Canada Fund. Now, that really isn't much of a commitment when you compare it to the support from the federal government over the years for the oil sands, for example. Why aren't you at the table to ensure this project proceeds now?
Sure, I appreciate that question. You've come here today with something that I've been extensively involved with for most of my private sector career and my political career. And with all due respect, I reject the premise, and I don't like to use that phrase, of where the provincial government, not you, have come on this particular development. The fact of the matter is that to understand the Ring of Fire, to appreciate the steps that have to be taken here, one would completely understand that FedNor, which I'm responsible for and doesn't fit here in natural resources, but I'm happy to talk about, has been actively engaged as full partners with a number of First Nations communities that I've had the opportunity and privilege to work in other capacities, to be involved in the environmental assessment processes that are involved in the development of the Ring of Fire. Furthermore, with certain precision, we have been engaged in energy corridors, full consultation to understand and address what things like the Ring of Fire can do to help have First Nations communities get road access to any of the 2 extraction sites, and to develop a better energy policy towards the First Nations communities in those areas and ultimately the Ring of Fire.
But you'd acknowledge they need access, obviously, and you can't
do
much until there's year-round access.
So they do. That's a great question. So is the better way to do that to consult with First Nations communities? Or a former provincial Liberal cabinet minister announced that smelting operations would be just outside the city he works in, when the Ontario Mine Commissioner, had made a judgment that that direction of that road would be at least temporarily impossible, given the province's failure to address the issues related to that. There are other alternatives, and that they've been developed, as I say, through our process. The other significant thing was obviously pre-positioning First Nations communities for jobs in that sector. I made an announcement just a couple of months ago for things that we should be making the announcement, and that is 260 seats at Confederation College in full cooperation with the Post-Secondary Education Authority for KCATS, the Matawa Aboriginal organization, and $3 million through the Ring of Fire directly to the Anishinaabe Development Fund, which would focus on business capacity and business development for First Nations communities in the Matawa organizations to derive direct benefits from the development of the Ring of Fire. So far, the only thing I can say about the $1 billion announcement is that it's given us finally some confidence that we have a scope and understanding of what the province might be willing to invest, but there have been no details, and the Development Corporation that they proposed had no policy or articles of incorporation to support it, by the admission of the provincial minister, who is a dear friend and colleague of mine, and I've worked very closely on this with him. So we hope after June 12th we'll have a clearer sense of what specific projects we need to move forward on, and the federal government looks forward to being a part of that. I would note finally that our provincial counterparts had absolutely no problem from 2009 to 2012 with focusing on specific projects that supported community and or resource development projects. I'm a little bit confused as to why they might be now. Maybe it's just because there's a provincial election going on.
Well, hopefully
Thank you, Minister. Thank you, Mr. Regan. We start the first 5-minute round now with Mr. Calkins. Go ahead, please, up to 5 minutes.
Well, thank you, Chair, and thank you, Minister, for being here today, and congratulations on your recent appointment as Minister of Natural Resources. I think it's absolutely fantastic to have a member of Parliament who represents such a large rural area, was so rich in natural resources, representing the file, and I certainly have utmost confidence that you'll continue to do a great job. Minister, my question is going to be a little bit broader than the scope of what would normally be considered part of the natural resources file. We know from recent events that have happened in Eastern Europe that Vladimir Putin and Russia have been using energy as an economic weapon, or threatened to use energy as an economic weapon. They've been meddling in the affairs of the Ukraine and so on, and as a result of that, our committee has undertaken a study where we've had a couple of meetings where we've discussed what Canada's role could or possibly should be in helping our traditional allies in Europe with some of their energy needs. So I'm wondering if you could update this committee on the discussions that you've had on the topic with some of your G7 counterparts, and tell this committee what Canada can do, what this committee can do, what the private sector could possibly do to help our allies abroad.
Thank you. This is a really important question, Mr. Chair, and it was one we were seized of in Rome at the G7. Obviously, there are a couple of important issues, and therefore things that I'm sure we would benefit as a government from getting participation from the Standing Committee on. First of all, in the context of the Ukraine, there's a very obvious over-reliance on supply from Russia. I would submit that this goes to at least 10 Eastern European countries that are in what I would frame as the 100% club. They're exclusively reliant on them. And there are varying degrees of dependency on energy supply from other European countries, certainly Western European countries. What the issues raise are energy supply and energy sources, and their implications on issues of national and, I would submit, global security, as we're currently finding out. The exercise that we went through at that conference was very important. In the first instance, it was to denounce Russia using energy as a means of coercion, and to denounce, obviously, their violation of Ukraine's sovereignty and territorial integrity, and that energy would be used, as I said, as a means of coercion to that end. But beyond that, our discussions focused on an alignment of a number of other key exercises, obviously energy collaboration, hydrocarbons, science-based and renewable or non-discriminatory regulation, innovation and responsible energy use, and particularly renewable energy, the need for alignment on GHGs. I had a bilateral meeting with Secretary Moniz on that, and we had identified some key opportunities in these regards. For us here at home, in the context of the main estimates and the policy platforms that support it, Mr. Chair, we need to understand how responsible resource development can move forward for energy products to get to our tide waters safely and for distribution to other markets. I met with my counterpart from Japan. I'll be attending a conference later this year there. And the number one topic is how far out are we from being able to bring product to their market. The good news is there's still time, and we would benefit from any work that the committee could give us on these matters. I think what we were satisfied is, with respect to Ukraine, there were some short-term measures that we could take to help them out, and I've offered the expertise of NRCan for some of those assessment processes. But in the context of our other partners, 2017 to 2020 have been identified as medium-term timelines where we could quite possibly get our product to those markets. That's consistent with the goals of, say, British Columbia, for example, in LNG. And so I'm satisfied that while there are some pressing things we need to do, we can fit those timelines and focus on, obviously, a dynamic energy supply from Canada to meet new customers' demands.
Thank you, Minister. Thank you, Mr. Calkins. We go now to Mr. Trost for up to 5 minutes. Go ahead, please, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Minister, for being here today. As I was noting to you earlier, you're number 7 as far as natural resources ministers that I've seen while I've been on this committee. Most of them get promoted, I'll note, so wishing you the best here. But in my time on this committee here, one of our better studies we did was on the issue of forestry. And that's why I was interested to note that in your remarks you noted about the $90.4 million over 4 years for investments in the forestry industry transformation. And coming from the riding of Kenora, you have a considerable amount of forestry in your riding. So with that as a background and that in mind, could you give us a bit of an overview about what the main estimates provide in terms of forestry sector support?
Every time forestry comes up, I'm always at the risk of digressing, so jump in any time if my answer reflects that. Let me say this, Mr. Chair. Obviously, there are considerable forestry potential in the Great Kenora Riding, for example, as there are in many regions of Canada. In particular, in Kenora, one of the challenges that we face is that even though our markets, the traditional ones that we've served, are showing signs of life, there is a pulse there, it was in fact decimated. And the question on its return is how is that going to happen? We cannot have our machines dusted off to cut boardfoot or just continue with primary pulp. In Kenora's case, we make world-class pulp that's involved in a number of testing, and nanocellulose technology, for example, confirms how the quality of our pulp. But that's all we're making with it right in our riding. So the residual questions, and the ones that the main estimates have to address, in my view, have got to focus on innovation, making the forest sector and the regions in particular from where our trees come more competitive for sustainable jobs, one that are not subjected, obviously, to things like we had just experienced with the recession of 2009. In the end, for example, in Kenora, all we were left with was 160 direct jobs at a value-added facility in Kenora and a couple of hundred direct jobs making pulp. Everything else had been eliminated, Mr. Chair. So the main estimates have to, and I'm pleased to report, do focus on investing in industry transformation. IFIT program itself offers up $90.4 million over 4 years. It's focused on Canada First technologies that foster innovation in the forestry sector. It's projected to support more than 12, possibly up to 15 innovation projects over the next 4 years. The main estimates also provide $93 million, it's 93, yeah, over 3 years for the Forest Innovation Program, and this will generate advanced, high-value products and processes in the industry, is helping to make Canada a world leader in several key technology areas. I should add as well that main estimates provide support for expanding market opportunity programs to increase offshore exports in the use of wood in non-residential and mid-rise construction in North America, and certainly as well in my capacity as the Minister responsible for FedNor. Our targeted manufacturing initiatives are focused obviously in mining and some forestry activities that go to support, since the regional economic agencies and/or programs can be a little bit more nimble to respond to the scale of manufacturing that could occur, particularly with respect to forestry, to help them in their efforts to become manufacturers instead of just raw producers. And that involves participation with colleges potentially to bring innovation centres to key areas across Northern Ontario. I see potential in Northern Saskatchewan as well, and I know some of that's being done so that people who come from those regions, who go to college in those regions, can come to better understand what the products that are naturally occurring in their regions actually do. And I'm stealing a page from my time as the Minister of Science and Technology, where over at NRC we do a myriad of things with residual pulp product and byproduct, but I don't think it's as well understood as it could be from people in regions where trees are cut for the purposes of materials manufacturing and pulp and the likes.
Thank you, Minister. Thank you, Mr. Trost. Your time is up. We go now to the official opposition again, to Ms. Leslie. Up to 5 minutes. Go ahead, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and welcome, Mr. Minister, and I add my congratulations to your appointment. It's exciting. I have high hopes for you in this role. I have high hopes because I know that you understand how important it is to diversify our energy economy. You talked in your opening about the need to diversify our energy markets, noting that really our market is the U.S. and so you talked about the need to diversify there, but I want to talk about diversifying our energy economy, our energy sector. And I want to know, what is the plan to diversify our energy sector? Because when I look at the estimates, I see a decrease of over $100 million for Clean Energy Fund, a decrease of about $31 million for eco-energy biofuels, a decrease of $25 million for the grants to Sustainable Development Technology Canada for biofuels, and no return of the eco-energy retrofit, as my colleague Ms. Duncan points out. So I don't see a commitment to ensuring that our energy portfolio is diversified. I see that all our eggs are in one basket, and I'm hoping you can share some good news with me.
Sure. I appreciate this opportunity, Mr. Chair. I think that the overall narrative might suggest that I respectfully couldn't agree with the way that was framed. I think it's fair to say when it comes to clean energy in general, and certainly funds or line items that are contained in the main estimates, are focused on kickstarting renewables like wind and biofuels, achieve our collective goal, obviously to let the market do its good work, but they're focused on technology, innovation and energy efficiency for cleaner and more renewable sources. I think in the context of the G7, we had discussions around issuing a joint statement that had alignment in these regards. And I think with respect to eco-energy initiatives, we've invested in more than 280 clean energy demonstration and research and development projects, and these projects are being delivered by the private sector, by universities and federal laboratories. I think this is a fully integrated way to proceed on this, and all available program funding, I might add, for that has been allocated to existing projects.
Can drill down just to one specific aspect, drill down, so to speak. I have read about, and Natural Resources has confirmed with media, I've read about this $22 million ad campaign for oil sands, and I'm just wondering then, if we are drilling down to the details, how much is being spent on ads for renewable energies and energy efficiency?
Well, thank you for that question and that metaphor, Mr. Chair. Drilling down, obviously, we're very proud of our international engagement campaign to promote responsible resource development. It's our job, obviously, to raise awareness in key international markets. They're focused on demonstrating that Canada is a world-class, environmentally responsible energy, which obviously is an umbrella term, partner. Our sector supports, obviously, significant numbers of jobs and is an important part of our economy. So any opportunity that we have to boast not just about our record with respect to responsible resource development, in the environmental as well as in the economic benefits and being a politically stable environment to serve international markets, we're going to take that opportunity. So
I'd love to see the department take on more responsible resource development and looking at our green resources and energy efficiency, because there's a lot of potential there for jobs. I'd like to pass over the remainder of my time to Ms. Moore.
Just a little bit over a minute, Ms. Moore. Go ahead, please.
Simplement, vous avez parlé du...
You spoke about the injection of $90 million approximately in the particular program IFIT, Investments in Forest Industry Training. Now, if you look at the amounts previously, it's actually a significant drop in funding. You just said that investing was important, but at the end of the day, there's a drop, and I have trouble grasping, getting a handle on that. You also said that given the competition in the rail network with the oil network, it's difficult to actually go ahead with forestry projects. Products aren't being sold because they're not being transported.
Oui, merci. Et je veux dire au départ que
I should say from the outset that my colleague will be able to respond to questions from on a year-by-year basis when it comes to investments. But as I said, as a rule of thumb, it's important to understand that the short-term investments on the part of the government will focus on infrastructure, including producers in the forestry sector. That'll give them access to a dynamic marketplace and will address technology and innovation needs for a sector that can be more competitive in the future. I only have about 30 seconds, so it limits my response, unfortunately. But I could continue.
Get on to our final questioner for today, Ms. Crockett. Go ahead, please, up to 5 minutes.
And thank you, Mr. Minister, for being here. I, too, am very excited to see you in this portfolio with the energy and drive that you're bringing to it, as well as your background in innovative technologies. And you spoke a little earlier about the need to understand how our energy industry, how our energy can get to Tidewater so that we can access other markets. And I want to talk about, or ask you about a market that's a little bit closer to home, and that is here in Canada. So many Canadians do not know that crude oil is actually Quebec's top imported product, and that the largest single source of oil to Quebec is Algeria. 28.1% of their oil comes from Algeria, according to Montreal Economic Institute. So I'm wondering if you might address, Mr. Minister, what measures and developments are underway to help Quebec get off its dependence on Algerian oil and to provide jobs in central and eastern Canada?
You know, this is a great question, not just for Canada in general, but for obviously the province of Quebec. We supported the decision by the National Energy Board in particular to approve the reversal of Line 9B. It is a safe way to transport energy products. It's environmentally responsible and will create jobs and long-term prosperity. I spoke at a forum in Montreal, and since we're using metaphors, as a former nurse, maybe I should say mine, we've had drilling and energy and drive. There was a palpable enthusiasm, if I was to take the pulse of our industry stakeholders in Montreal, to ensure that Quebec was participating in the opportunities related to what your question. Line 9 will transport Western Canadian oil east to refineries in Montreal and Lévis. This pleases the industry. They'd like to get back into that business more substantially. And of course, it goes without saying that every barrel of oil from Western Canada displaces a barrel of oil coming from a foreign source, which will assist Quebec, obviously, in ending its dependence on, as you particularly pointed out, Algerian oil. So Line 9 is a made-in-Canada solution. The reversal here will have the benefit of protecting jobs in Quebec and across Canada, and I believe create an opportunity to further develop the confidence and understanding that Canadians and communities across this great country will have in our efforts to ensure that we have world-class, world-leading pipeline safety. And it's designed not just to address international markets, but as your particular question points out, to address demand and capacity, particular in Quebec, for our energy products. To that extent, it's a win-win for us all.
Excellent. You also mentioned that one of your tasks as minister is to create more confidence and help people to understand in Canada what's going on with resource development, and I presume that extends, and I know that it does, to the opportunities that exist for Canadians. And on the topic of transporting Western Canadian oil to Eastern Canada, one of the highlights of the recently completed study at this committee, I know that you're aware, is the cross-Canada benefits of developing the oil and gas industry, was the testimony that we heard from New Brunswick. Now, the study isn't out yet, as you know. I believe it's in translation right now. But the testimony certainly has been public, and people from New Brunswick testified, most specifically the mayor of St. John, testified that they had a very, very strong desire to be a have province, and especially in terms of energy development. And we're looking to provinces like Saskatchewan. I believe one of the quotes was, "We want to be Saskatchewan," from New Brunswick. Kelly's all in favor of that. And I'm wondering, can you please tell us what do proposed projects like Energy East offer to these communities?
Well, as I said before, thank you, Mr. Chair, for the question. We believe that Western Canadian refineries, or that like Western Canadian refineries in Eastern Canada should have the opportunity to source competitively priced Canadian oil. I think it would be counterintuitive to think about it any other way. So we welcome in principle the prospect of shipping Western Canadian oil to Eastern Canada and to new markets abroad, and as I alluded to in my previous answer, for domestic demand. Because we understand the importance of diversifying our markets in order to benefit from the incredible opportunity of energy development within natural resource provide. This particular project will have to undergo a scientific environmental review by the National Energy Board, and we'll wait for the science and the facts before we conduct our own review and determinations. But I can tell you is that for my part, in my capacities as the Minister of Natural Resources, what we're focused on here is ensuring that the foundational pieces like pipeline safety and the measures we'll take will lead to providing greater confidence and understanding for communities from coast to coast to coast, that they are in fact world-class and that elements of it are world-leading. We've already gone through this exercise in meeting the stringent condition, 5 conditions from British Columbia, or at least 4 of them, since one of the conditions was as between Alberta and British Columbia. We want to ensure that our prevention, our preparedness and response, and in particular our liability regime, give Canadians the confidence. To that extent, We have an absolute liability regime in place. It's the only one of its kind in the world of up to $1 billion. In the remote case that there was a spill, it doesn't matter whose fault it was. The pipeline companies have to start their activities immediately. The fault and negligent regime remains in place, and it's unlimited. And obviously, what we've proposed in a recent announcement that I've made, and I hope will garner the support of our colleagues from across the floor, is new powers for the National Energy Board to enforce activities and not make taxpayers pay, but rather focus on polluters paying in the event that, as rare as it might be, a spill should occur. So these are the important pieces, I think, that help build confidence through engagement and through consultation with our communities across the country, that what is being proposed here and what is already in place is working. We're proud of our 99.999% safety record for the more than 73,000 kilometers of pipeline that we already have in Canada, and we want to build on that success, as statistically as impressive as that might seem.
Thank you very much, Mr. Minister, Ms. Crockett. That completes our time with the Minister. We'll continue the discussion with departmental officials after we reconvene the meeting. But I want to start, Minister, by thanking you very much for an informative and very helpful meeting in terms of giving us a good picture of where you intend to take this portfolio. Looking forward to that very much, and hope to have you back many times in the next year and beyond. So thank you very much, Minister. I'll suspend the meeting now while the Minister leaves the table and departmental officials seat themselves. Reconvene the meeting now, and we'll just carry on with the order of questioners from those who ask questions of the minister. I'd like to start by welcoming to the floor Ms. Ramcharan, who is, who is the Assistant Deputy Minister, Chief Financial Officer, Corporate Management and Services Sector. And thank you very much. And Serge Dupont here still. He was with the Minister and back again, Deputy Minister, Department of Natural Resources, to answer any questions that the members might have for the departmental officials. So we'll carry on with the list that we'd started before, and we'll start with Ms. Moore. Up to 5 minutes. Go ahead, please, Ms. Moore.
Bon, ben, j'aimerais revenir sur ma question.
I'd like to come back to my question regarding forestry. I asked a question of Minister Rickford. In his remarks, he spoke about $90.4 million over 4 years as part of IFIT, the Investments in Forest Industry Training Program. Now, when you look at the previous funding and you compare the envelopes, there's in fact a drop in funding of about $30 million. So I'd like to understand how the money was used in the past. Was it completely used up? Why was this decision made? Given that investment and transformation would seem to me to be crucial to give our forestry industry the kickstart that it really needs. Mr. Chair, I appreciate this opportunity to elaborate on the response that the Minister gave, given the short time that he had to, in fact, give one. Now, the way the information is presented to committees sometimes creates confusion. You said, and correctly so, that there has been a drop of about $37.5 million as compared last year. The program expired on the 31st of March 2014. The extension of the program announced in the budget is not in the main estimates, but in the supplementary estimates that will be submitted later. Now, the IFIT program was $100 million over 4 years. Last year it was $37.5 million because some of the money spent over the first 3 years was pushed over into the fourth year. So it was $100 million over 4 years. The program was renewed to the tune of $90.4 million over 4 years. And you'll have further information in upcoming estimates. You asked about the number of projects. There have been 14 projects funded. Money was used from the first round of or cycle of the program. There were 14 programs across Canada. I'm talking about first generation technology here, and we expect that with the envelopes that we have, the $90.4 million that is, we'll be able to seek support for about 12 to 14 projects across Canada. So I understand that it was $100 million previously. Now it's $90.4 million. So you've got to factor in inflation. So obviously there has been a drop in the money earmarked for this program. The other question I have about the number of projects is the following. Is there a departmental willingness, so to speak, to ensure that the money is divvied up across the regions appropriately so that there is not just a focus, for example, on one region? Is it divided up? That's an excellent question again, Mr. Chairman. I think the purpose, the spirit, the pith of the program is to support industry across Canada. However, there's no quota that's been developed on a per region basis. There's no systematic distribution of these budgets. The money is allocated on a merit basis. What we've seen in the first phase and what we foresee in the second phase is on a merit-based fashion. Given the industry Canada-wide will be able to fund projects across all regions, including British Columbia and other regions in Canada where there are skills and assets in the forestry industry. Now, given the difficulty in terms of transportation, has your department taken steps to facilitate the transportation of processed goods so that they can be sold down the line? The question of transport by rail is a hot button and important issue for forestries, mines and natural resources sector. Agricultural products are the purview of my department, the Department of Transport, and we are trying to keep a close eye on this issue and keep stakeholders in the Department of Transport fully aware, but I'm not properly placed and really familiar with this issue to respond.
To Ms. Block, up to 5 minutes. Go ahead, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and I would like to welcome you, Mr. DuPont, to this meeting, as well as recognize the very capable team that you have joining you today, and look forward to hearing your testimony in response to the questions that we have. I'm sure you are aware that we've recently completed our cross-Canada benefit study on developing the oil and gas industry, and we heard a fair bit of testimony from witnesses about the importance of engaging Aboriginal communities in resource development, given the fact that this is one of the 4 pillars of our responsible resource development plan. Given the announcements that were made earlier this week, I am wondering if you could provide for us any information on what the main estimates provide for Aboriginal participation in the resource economy.
Mr. Chair, the amounts that will be invested in respect of fostering further the participation of Aboriginal Canadians in the resource economy, and specifically in the energy sector, would not yet be reflected in the main estimates. We have been doing some work in fostering greater conversations and dialogue with Aboriginal Canadians from Western Canada and other parts of Canada through our existing authorities, for example, through the authorities already funding the Major Project Management Office in other parts. We all have had for a number of years as well, and I don't have the numbers at my fingertips, support provided through our forestry programs for Aboriginal participation in the forestry sector, working with Aboriginal Affairs and Northern Development. We also support development of resources in the north through a range of initiatives covering, again, going back to geomapping for energy and minerals, where we also engage with communities. The Polar Continental Shelf Program, which is a science-based facility where we also engage with Aboriginal Canadians. So this dialogue with Aboriginal Canadians cuts across virtually all of our programs and would not be found in one of the line items in the main estimates.
Thank you very much for that. I recognize that as you go through the main estimates, the investments that we are making when it comes to Aboriginal communities are embedded within some of the different lines in the main estimates. I'm wondering then if what you could do for me is provide any information on what the priorities are for your department moving forward.
Sure. There are essentially, we wish to continue to support through a range of initiatives and programs responsible resource development. That means working on innovation, in particular innovation in forestry, innovation in mining, for example, our green mining initiative, innovation in the energy sector to enhance the economic but also the environmental performance of energy technologies of our energy sector, and therefore responsible resource development as well, regulatory oversight through the MPMO, ensuring continued efficiency and effectiveness of the regulatory system. That's responsible resource development. Energy market diversification, the Minister indicated, that is a very clear priority for the government and therefore for Natural Resources Canada. Try to ensure that there is the infrastructure that is reviewed, that the government policy framework, including marine safety, pipeline safety, in engagement with Aboriginal Canadians, is in furtherance of that objective. We also have some very important fundamental functions in Natural Resources Canada related to the safety and security of Canadians. We received in the last budget some monies to improve, upgrade our earthquake monitoring capabilities. We are experts in assessing, for example, a range of geohazards, and that is the kind of very basic activity that we conduct, for example, through the Geological Survey of Canada. So we try to be at the outer edge of the frontiers and the north frontiers of innovation, but also in some of our very basic functions of understanding our Earth, understanding our landmass, the risks and the opportunities that it provides.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Block. We go now to Ms. Duncan, up to 5 minutes. Go ahead, please.
Thank you very much, and thanks for sticking around. Lots of questions for you. I'll try to get a few in. Can you tell us, can we find anywhere in the mains a specific allocation for the Canadian-U.S. Clean Energy Dialogue, and in particular engagement of the public in those dialogues?
You would not have a specific line item on the Clean Energy Dialogue. The Clean Energy Dialogue is one in which the government, Natural Resource Canada, participates. The ministerial lead for the Clean Energy Dialogue is the Minister of the Environment. There has been obviously bilateral contacts between Minister Rickford and his counterpart, Secretary Moniz, discussions between our department and Department of Energy.
Well, I'm just asking if there's money allocated. I know it exists. I just want to know if there's money allocated.
You will not find a line item again in the main estimates. We do have some monies in the department allocated to the Clean Energy Dialogue. I couldn't give you the number at our fingertips. It's not a large amount of money. You know, off the top of my head, it would be, you know, in a range perhaps of $5 million or so.
Okay, thanks. Our committee previously did a study, as my colleagues have mentioned, of potential for assistance of Canada to Ukraine. And it was revealed that, in fact, the minister had taken several trips to Europe, I think one to Poland, one to Germany, where he had brought along representatives from the oil and gas sector, but nobody from the renewable or energy efficiency sector. Can you tell us who makes the decisions and who goes along in those delegations? Is it the department?
It is, you know, there's consultation between the minister's office and the department. It would also as well depend on the interests that are expressed by the host country. Our mission in the host country will have conversations and consultations with the host country, report back. Invitations will be launched to different parties. Not everybody who is invited comes, and so the representation at the end of the day may not always be the one that we started with. But it's a range of consultations and interest on the part of the host country and of our industry here.
I note that the Maine shows a decrease of $4.5 million in advertising, which seems kind of pitiful given the fact that the department spent hundreds of millions in the last year on advertising. Can you tell me what the total is budgeted for advertising for this department?
Yes, I can. Just give me a second. I would, however, wish to clarify that there certainly has not been, did I hear hundreds of millions? Or
that is my
there seem to be perhaps or tens even. Essentially what
100 million plus? How about that?
certainly not in this department and not for this portfolio. What is currently contemplated is within a 2-year envelope of $30 million, and this is not advertising actually, I should come back to that. $30 million was allocated for a 2-year international stakeholder engagement and outreach campaign. Of that, $22,750,000 will be allocated to advertising expenditures, that is international advertising, to promote Canada's responsible resource development in Europe, in the United States, and other markets.
Does that include promoting our energy efficiency expertise?
It promotes broadly Canada's expertise in the energy sector, the resources we can bring to bear, the capabilities, the know-how, the fact that Canada is a responsible supplier of natural resources and energy.
That's, in others, the answer is no.
I'm sorry?
Then the answer is no. My specific question is, does the advertising plan and budget include promoting energy efficiency expertise and technology from Canada?
No, it does not. It does not promote any specific industry. What it does is promote Canada as a responsible supplier of energy.
Is there anything in these mains that specifically allocates funds for providing clean energy to Aboriginal or isolated communities? And would I find that in the Clean Energy Fund? Do I find that in the Energy R&D? Where would I find that?
Deputy Minister, if you could give a very brief answer, please.
Sure. Again, you would find it, for example, I mean, you would not find, again, the line item. What you would have, for example, is that under our Energy Innovation Program, we have funded, a number of initiatives, for example, to see how one could utilize technology of hydrogen and storage to facilitate wind energy deployment in isolated communities so that there's better utilization of wind energy. We have looked at different other technologies that would have application in the north and in remote communities. Under the minister mentioned 280 projects. A number of those would have been germane to the needs of remote communities, but there would not be a line item for Aboriginal or remote communities as regards clean energy.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Duncan. We go now for up to 5 minutes. Mr. Leaf, go ahead, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The minister mentioned in his opening address the geomapping program, and I'm just wondering if you have an opportunity to talk about how that support, how the geomapping program will support the mining and energy sector, with particular emphasis on what it'll do for the northern regions of Canada.
Right. Essentially what the geomapping program does is to provide the first layer of exploration, the basic information about the geology that then allows the industry to target its efforts where, based on that information, they see that they may be promised to find this or that type of minerals. So we do that through field projects. We actually have teams of geologists, including graduate students, for example, out in the field analyzing the geology, with their eyes and still the chisel and so forth. That is still part of it, as well as through remote sensing, so satellite data, airborne surveys, and what we then do is our scientists integrate that information, publish the equivalent of maps and geological information. We do that openly. What I mean by that is we basically put it on the website, and any firm, any outside party can come in and look at that information and decide where they want to target their investments. We also are active in conferences. We provide 800 technical information sessions. We provided over a period of 5 years 800 technical information sessions, and we therefore interact as well with the industry in kind of open floor-like conferences and so forth in Canada and abroad.
Anecdotally, I've heard a lot of support for the geomapping program, and I was mentioning to the minister in the opening address that I was at the Gold Show in the Yukon, which is quite a large industry gathering there, and of course when we talk about these things, they're supportive and love these programs. But is there a way that you're able to determine the metrics of site visits to the website or a way of measuring sort of those anecdotal comments that come in at big mining conferences like PDAC or other locations?
It's a good question. What we do, we've released, for example, over the 5-year period, 840 open files. It's really providing information. We kind of have a rule of thumb in the department that for every dollar that we put into GEM, there's kind of going to be $5 of exploration expenditures that actually are going to flow over time, and about $20 at the end of the day of actual mining development expenditures, because of course when the development actually starts, then that really expands. So those are kind of rules of thumb that we use. And we certainly do find that there is high demand, that as soon as that information is out there, there is very rapid pickup. So I couldn't give you kind of the number of clicks and so forth, but we find heavy traffic right away. In other words, the industry out there is going to be really quick at checking what's the new information, how valuable it is, and then they can decide and target their interventions.
So that's an interesting figure, and it's even just by rule of thumb, it's a great story for us that a dollar worth of investment gets a $5 return on it, and I think more than qualifies the expenditure, the not just the sort of the advertising aspect of that, but the educational input of those sorts of programs. Are there similar programs under the main estimates now that mirror or are close to the geomapping program that demonstrate similar returns, and if so, what would those be?
There is, I don't have the similar kind of numbers at my fingertips, but Targeted Geoscience Initiative is one that we also collaborate with the provinces. It's a bit of an analog of GEM, where we work with the provinces and get immediate leverage because they also put money then, even before we count the follow-on expenditures by the industry. We try for all of our innovation projects to look at how we're leveraging private sector investment. We don't just spend $100 in our labs without trying to have partners and ensure that if we're going to put $100, there's a partner that's going to come in and make a contribution. In some cases, for example, the monies that have been advanced in respect of carbon capture and storage, leverage with the province of Alberta and leverage with the industry have been multiplied many-fold in terms of the federal kind of contribution. So that is a constant kind of gauge for us of ensuring that the dollars that are spent by the department actually respond to a real need, a real opportunity, because there's often nothing, better than, the cold cash on the other side to measure that there is that need, that opportunity that others are actually prepared to invest into. And that's true, for example, Sustainable Development Technology Canada, which is funded in here, will provide up to a maximum of 35% of grant for the value of a project. The other 65% has to come from investors actually willing to take the risk.
Thank you very much, Deputy Minister. Thank you, Mr. Leaf. We go now to Mr. Calkins. Up to 5 minutes, please.
Well, thank you very much, Chair. Thank you very much for staying behind for another hour to answer some questions. The first question I have for you is in regards to the National Energy Board and the amounts that's for the National Energy Board that are here. At this committee, I've expressed frustrations in the past at how long some of the approvals have taken place. For example, the Line 9 reversal, obviously involving the public consultation process and so on, for things that seem to be matters of in-house. Notwithstanding that, Bill C-38 was passed by Parliament back in 2012, which made some changes to the National Energy Board review process, and I'm surprised to see that the National Energy Board to this date still has a fairly substantial budgetary allocation, and I'm just wondering what the implications or the impact of that passing Bill C-38, which streamlined the regulatory process and streamlined some of the things that the National Energy Board is responsible for, doesn't seem to impact overall their budget. Could you explain to me why?
There are a number of factors that will affect the budgetary resources of the National Energy Board, as with any other organization. The estimated expenditures this year are up to $71.3 million relative to $62.4, and that is largely because the National Energy Board this year is basically relocating and expending one-time monies to kind of refit offices and go into a new facility.
You're talking about the Calgary office?
That's right. That's right. And that's going to be essentially, if you wish, kind of repaid over the next number of years, next 10 years. Meanwhile, as indicated in the budget, what has happened is, yes, I mean, for example, for a major pipeline project now, there is an 18-month period of time that is legislated for their review and a decision. That includes the time that the government itself has to make the decision upon receiving the report of the National Energy Board. So it basically means that the National Energy Board now has 15 months to conduct a review of a pipeline project, a major pipeline project. They now, of course, as we know, have recently completed one major project. They will have another one is already in the pipeline, so to speak, forgive the pun, Trans Mountain, and Energy East may be expected to file soon. And because you have these large projects coming at the board at the same time, there were additional resources provided in budget 2014 for it to be able not only to meet that demand, but to meet it within the timelines. The budget provided $28 million over 2 years. Now, that's not a cost to taxpayers because those monies are going to be fully recovered from the industry. But nonetheless, the way the accounting works, it does have to be recorded in the main estimates as an expenditure. The revenues subsequently come in. So basically, the net is zero to the taxpayer. But for transparency's sake, it is still provided for information for the parliamentarians.
Okay, so what assurances can you give to this committee then to tell us, based on what's in the pipeline, in the queue, so to speak, insofar as regulatory requirements for the National Energy Board, will it have the resources? I know they've been allocated here, and you just said that. Can you assure this committee that those allocation of those resources will be substantive enough to make sure that the regulatory process is not held up by a lack of government funding?
The best person to answer the question would be the chair of the National Energy Board, but I can assure the committee, or assure you through the chair, that certainly every conversation I would have had with the National Energy Board would suggest to me the chair would be very comfortable in saying that they have the resources that they need with the amounts provided in Budget 2014, again, that will be cost recovered to fulfill their mandate and to fulfill the mandate within the timelines now established in law.
And can you just please talk to me a little bit about, or explain to this committee, the budgetary allocation amounts insofar as natural resource, or NRCan, Science and Technology, the internship program, and what the budget amount is allocated for that internship program, and how and what we might expect to see coming from that internship program?
The internship program receives $600,000 annually. It provides wage assistance to support work experience opportunities with external organizations for as many as 60 interns annually. So we essentially provide, we have a very small program, there's 1 to 2 people who administer it. About $600,000 may be provided to employers in order to effectively subsidize wages for up to 60 interns a year. It's a relatively modest program, but it has appeared to worked well in order to provide, for the most part, young Canadians just graduating from university a first work experience, a first-hand in the resource sector.
Is there any rubrics put in place to follow up with these interns afterwards to see, and what metrics do you have to gauge the success of the program? I'm sure there must have been something established in that regards.
A very brief answer, please.
It will be very brief, Mr. Chair, because I will have to come back to the committee on that to give a more specific answer.
Thank you, and thank you, Mr. Calkins. Just before we get on to our next questioner, who's Ms. Moore, who is followed by Mr. Regan, I'd like to propose to the committee that we, after Ms. Moore and Mr. Regan ask their questions, that we then go to the votes on the main estimates, and then allow for a little bit of time to go in camera to discuss future business. We do have a meeting following our meeting, a meeting of the PROC with main estimates, and I understand the speaker may be one of the witnesses there. So the next two questioners would be Conservative questioners anyway, so I'm just asking for approval from the committee to end this part of our meeting with Ms. Moore and Mr. Regan. Is that agreed? Thank you very much. We don't want to... Yes, Mr. Regan. Of course they're tough questions from the government side, but go ahead, please, Ms. Moore, up to 5 minutes.
I would like to ask also two questions about two decrees on the budget. One, it's 31.2 million for the eco-energy for biofuels program, and the other decrease, it's 25 million for the appropriate grant to Sustainable Development Technology Canada for the Next Generation Biofuels Funds. Donc, avec ces deux diminutions,
so with these two drops or reductions for biofuels, for example, what motivated the department's change in orientation away from biofuels? Mr. Chair, as the Minister remarked earlier, the Biofuels Grant Program is a multi-year program which had an agreement profile from its genesis and structure to reduce the support envelopes over time. That was the intent. With each production firm for which we establish eligibility, there is a grant which is paid for the production of biofuels over a specific time frame, and this contribution reduces over time. The firms, the companies, can continue to provide biofuels based on market conditions thereafter. So given the structure of the program itself, the expenditures naturally go down. Based on the current forecast, we will have spent about $100 billion in grants to these biofuels companies. And I'm sorry, I'm going to use the English acronym because I don't have the French acronym at the tip of my tongue. It's SDC, for the next generation of biofuels. The drop in financial support is a result of the fact that from year to year we need to factor in take into account the interest expressed by the private sector. This program has to do with a third party, SDTC. They have to seek out valid bidders who meet criteria. Now, the willingness of investors is lacking, and that means that these projects haven't come to fruition as we would have hoped. So this lack of interest on the part of investors, these innovative firms, if you will, have resulted in the fact, well, our spending envelopes of SDTC show that spending has been less than expected. Now, you said that there would be a drop in spending over time, and I'm wondering if you think that the money invested to date has enabled us to meet the targeted objectives or go beyond them, exceed them, or on the contrary, whether they have not been reached. So have the objectives been met, exceeded, or not reached? I'd like a sense of whether, generally speaking, the money allocated was invested appropriately and has provided results. Well, of course, we're always concerned about measuring the impact of programs. I think you need to distinguish the effectiveness. You have to distinguish between ethanol and biofuels when it comes to determining effectiveness. For biodiesel, there's about 2 million litres of production per year, which is subsidised. That's 94% of our total needs. We're satisfied with this total production, and also satisfied with the fact that the analyses would suggest that beyond the program, these producers are going to continue to be financially viable, and they'll be able to continue to produce ethanol once the program has expired, because they will have anchored their place in the market. For biofuel, it's harder. There are 8 agreements. We've reached 61% of our target. What you need to understand is this is a partnership with producers. So the partner needs to play its role. Contributions for biodiesel were made difficult because of the conditions of the market conditions, and even with the grants we offer, producers weren't always able to bring their projects to fruition to a level that we were able to support or willing to support. So when it comes to biodiesel, they didn't meet expectations. As far as ethanol is concerned, all's good.
We go to Mr. Regan for up to 5 minutes to end the questioning of the departmental officials. Go ahead, please, Mr. Regan.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Président. Merci aux témoins d'être ici aujourd'hui.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Thank you to the witnesses for being here.
$30.9 million in funding for the Stakeholder Engagement and Outreach Campaign to Build Prosperity for Canada. Can you please explain to us what this Stakeholder Engagement and Outreach Campaign to Build Prosperity for Canada is all about, and why is it so hard to find any information about this campaign?
Quite happy to provide the information. I mentioned earlier the government announced last year, I think, that it was $30 million would be allocated over a period of 2 years to do 2 things. One is to advertise internationally, again, about the fact that Canada is a responsible supplier of energy, to ensure that in major capitals in the world that they understand our commitment to not only be a supplier of energy, but also be a responsible supplier of energy and of energy know-how and technology and competencies. That includes advertising then over the period in a range of $22,750,000, as I mentioned. There's also amounts to be paid for outreach. Those are different activities that may be funded, that may, for example, be promoted by our missions abroad, conferences, seminars, workshops, and so forth, that we organize to sensitize decision makers around the capacities of our energy sector broadly. There's also, obviously some salaries and internal services to the tune of $2.75 million within that $30 million envelope.
Okay, can you get back to the committee with a detailed breakdown of how that money will be, rather than trying to go through it all right now?
No, I'd be happy to, because it's all public information.
Okay, thank you very much. According to the main estimates, AECL's planned expenditures for 2014-15 will be $102 million. How much of that will be spent on maintaining and operating the NRU reactor in Chalk River? And what portion, if any, will be earmarked from Budget 2014 to commit to transition the nuclear laboratories to government-owned, contractor-operated, to that model?
Thank you for the question. To ensure completeness in the answer, so you're quite right, $102 million in the main estimates. I should add that the budget 2014 announced supplemental funding for ACL, which will essentially go to the Chalk River Laboratories, for $117 million over 2 years on an accrual basis. So additional monies have been provided in the budget. I don't have the breakdown here as between the National Research Universal Reactor and other components of the research mission at the Chalk River Laboratories, indeed other laboratories. Clearly, the NRU, as we call it, is a major piece of infrastructure, a major piece of equipment that does require a fair amount of expenditures to operate. My understanding is there's roughly 300 people whose work at Chalk River is principally focused on the reactor. So that's about 300 of roughly 3,300 who are actually involved in the nuclear laboratories.
Are you aware of concerns from the Canadian Association of Nuclear Medicine who warned that shutting down the NRU in 2016 would put the supply of medical isotopes in serious danger and alternatives may not be available? In fact, they've said, and I quote, "The potential doomsday scenario of simultaneous closures, shutdown, maintenance of the NRU and other reactors in Europe or elsewhere in the following 2 to 4 years could be postponed or cancelled if the NRU was allowed to operate for a few more years," unquote.
Under any scenario, the supply of radiomedical isotopes will be an issue of attention for the government and indeed for global partners and for supply chain. As the committee will know, the NRU, for example, was offline for a period of 15 months about 2 years ago. There have been stepped-up efforts in the international community to coordinate reactor outages, to coordinate reactor supply. There have also been efforts on the demand side to ensure that the available quantities of radioisotopes at any point in time are properly utilized. The government is committed to has reinvested in sustained supply from the NRU until 2016. It is also, as you know, promoting alternative sources of supply. So there's a range of initiatives that together are intended to assure, under any scenario, better security supply for medical radioisotopes.
The main estimates.
Thank you, Mr. Regan. Your time is up. I'd just like to start, before we go to the votes, by thanking very much our departmental officials for being here today, Deputy Minister Dupont for being here for the whole meeting, and Kami Rancharan for being here for the second hour, Assistant Deputy Minister, Chief Financial Officer, Corporate Management and Services Sector. Thank you both very much. Before we go in camera for future business, I do want to go through the votes so we can report the estimates, the main estimates to the House. There are 7 votes. The choices of the committee are either to carry, to defeat the motions, or to reduce the amounts in the votes. And so we'll start by the first vote. Shall vote 1 under Atomic Energy of Canada Limited, carry. On division. Shall vote 1 under the Canadian Nuclear Safety Commission, carry. On division. Shall vote 1 under the National Energy Board, carry. On division. Shall vote 1 under Natural Resources, carry. On division. Shall vote 5 under Natural Resources, carry. On division. Shall vote 10 under Natural Resources, carry. On division. Shall vote 1 under Northern Pipeline Agency, carry. On division. And finally, shall the Chair report the main estimates for 2014, less the amounts voted in interim supply, to the House? On division. Thank you all very much for your cooperation. We'll now suspend very briefly, go in camera for a very short future business meeting.